Hi, I'm Laura Quilter. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I'm a parent of a fourth grader, and thanks to Amherst Media for having us.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Gage, a town meeting member also, but from Precinct 1, and the founding board chair of Amherst Cinema, and a member of the Charter Commission. I really want to add to Laura's thanks to Amherst Media for making this fabulous opportunity for the people of Amherst to get to hear more about both sides of this very, very, very important campaign culminating on March 27th.
Yeah, we're here representing not this charter, and we're going to urge people to vote no on March 27th. There are a lot of reasons that you should be questioning this charter. We're going to only have time to address a few of them, but we have resources online with more information.
Mm-hmm. The biggest problem is the lack of checks and balances. Strong democracies have different branches of government that check each other and balance each other, both in terms of power and authority. This is the gold standard. It's like the benchmark of a democracy. It's what the Carter Center and the UN look for when they travel around the world and evaluate democracies. It's what you learned about in 9th grade. Right now, Amherst has a legislative branch, which is town meeting, 254 people, and an executive branch, which is the select board and the town manager. The select board and the town manager develop policy, and it's approved or amended or not approved by town meeting. The charter proposal that you'll vote on at the end of this month merges those all into one all-powerful body, a city council of only 13 people who have complete authority over the town. In addition, the town manager that we know today in the charter proposal is weaker, so that he or she, right now it's a he, but he or she doesn't have the same authority. So the council actually controls the town manager as the legislative body in ways that would be unheard of for town meeting. The paid city council would have complete authority in a way that was alarming to the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization funded by the state in order to maintain and promote best practices in Massachusetts municipalities. They sent a letter in June to the Charter Commission, which our majority, which didn't include me, I was very unhappy, ignored, saying they were concerned about the lack of checks and balances because of the weakened manager position. And then we didn't do anything about it, and they sent a similar, more alarmed letter later in September. An example of how weak the manager is he no longer appoints the planning board. He proposes planning board members that the council approves. Then the planning board, for example, goes off and creates zoning proposals that the very same council that had power to appoint them approves or not. It's a really tight circle of limited, controlled power of a very few number of people on a much larger number of responsibilities.
One of the things that concerns me about this charter is that all of that power is being centralized and consolidated to 13 people, and the enormous reduction not only increases the power that each individual counselor will have over, for instance, town meeting members, but it also really reduces the ability of a variety of people to get onto the council, because what you end up seeing is that in town meetings across the state, 42% of representative town meetings have, town meetings across the state have 42% women in them. And that is actually unheard of for legislative bodies, which typically have 25% or fewer women. And that ranges from Congress to the Senate to town councils to select boards, and yes, in liberal towns as well. And so, we currently have the system where we have actually a majority of women on our town meeting, with 56% women, and we're going to be seeing that number just inevitably reduce, and that makes me really sad as a feminist, as a mom. And in terms of the effects on people of color, I will say that Amherst Town Meeting is far more representative than the select board, which has not had a single person of color in 10 years. And that's the sort of situation that I see when we look at town councils around the state. And it's unfortunate. Town meeting has a ways to go, but we're so far ahead of where councils are. And so again, I look at this consolidation of power as not just consolidating power into the hands of few, but consolidating power into the hands of the few who are already very privileged.
So there are two enormous problems that Laura and I have just described. Should the city charter that's been proposed be approved, ending Amherst's robust democracy? One is a lack of checks and balances, and the other is a dramatic reduction in elected participation. These are two enormous problems that compound each other in ways that are obvious in terms of neighborhoods, maintaining community services, and limiting the influence of wealthy special interests. Let me just ask, when was it ever a good idea to concentrate all power unchecked in the hands of a few people?
In fact, when you look at the people who are running for town meeting right now, which I spent quite a lot of time doing, the people who have publicly come out in favor of the charter versus the people who have publicly come out in opposition to the charter, and we actually see striking differences. We have, again, we have 60 to 65% women running who are opposed to the charter. If you look at the people who are supporting and have come out against the charter, it actually turns out that it's 45% women, 55% men. Wow. If you want to look at people of color, not one single person of color has been identified as somebody who is supporting the charter, publicly supporting the charter. In terms of people who are opposed to the charter, there are about 14% of our candidates are going to be people of color. And so we have students, we have renters. It's a much more diverse pool, and I think that really speaks to the appeal of participatory democracy and the ability to actually participate and have a seat at the table.
Wow. So many questions. I'm so grateful to our campaign, Not This Charter, for having a team that does research and has all this information, and regret more of that wasn't done by the commission itself. But let's go to what the charter supporters say is the check. We've talked about all these problems. What do they say? Do they say there's no check? No. The check on the council, this all-powerful council, is the voter. And I would love to hear, Laura, your research on the role of voters, and when we look around the state at other council manager of towns and what you found out.
Yeah, I mean, it does fly in the face of what we understand about checks and balances, which are an institutional check, right? To now say sort of that just the basic fundamental of democracy is the only check we need. And then when we look around and actually see, you know, how does that check work in practice, what we see is it doesn't work very well at all, right? Incumbents have a 90% election rate in council elections around the state, which is just ultimately incredibly dismal and calls into utter question any idea of, you know, accountability via elections, right?
Yeah, and even if the voters could hold an elected council member accountable by the election, by the time 2 years rolls around, the ground has been dug, the department is reorganized or whatever. So the city council, the city charter defenders are looking to voters to hold government accountable through elections. Although based on the data that you've just described, this sounds like magical thinking to me. Just because you say it isn't true. And then people say, well, in Amherst it would be different. We're a very different kind of place. In my opinion, Amherst exceptionalism is no more credible a political theory than American exceptionalism. But we're talking about voters. Let's shift to the elections, Laura, and the fact that they're 2-year terms. 28 seats will all be up the same day, every 2 years. We'll have this constant cycle of elections. The school committee came in to speak with the Charter Commission twice, very unhappy with this proposal because they'll only have 2-year terms for a whole variety of reasons I don't need to go into. What are your thoughts about the November elections?
Well, I mean, obviously the cycle has its own costs, which it would be nice if people could acknowledge that. You know, the benefit that they tout is that, well, it's November. It's a November election, and so that will be increased participation. That's unfortunately a little bit misleading, right? Because we all know that the increased participation comes about in presidential and gubernatorial November elections, right? That's every 4 years or every 2 years, depending. the elections that we're going to be seeing are not following on that. And so, in fact, we actually are not going to benefit from the November turnout boost at all. I find that to be both sad in terms of increasing participation, but also problematic in terms of, trying to sell your data based on one term that will be confusing to voters.
Let's move on here, some of the things that we want to be sure to mention. One of the, as I've said, it's hard for me to get off this because it's so important. The most upsetting things is the lack of checks and balances. And I have to see, last week at the debate that the League organized, a member of the commission actually said regarding checks and balances, quote, this checks and balances argument is popular with the opposition because it sounds government-y. It sounds like something that ought to be important. Well, guess what? It is important, and that's why I have such a hard time stopping talking about it. That what's before the Amherst public is a proposal that puts all power in the hands of a small number of people. It's not just government-y.
In terms of thinking about the small number of people, I mean, I think one of the other arguments that's been advanced for this charter is like, oh, well, we'll have increased turnout through more competitive elections. And actually, we looked at the numbers on that, and it turns out that the council in Massachusetts turnout is effectively exactly the same as it is in other kinds of elections. You have uncontested seats at 60% in statewide council elections around the state. So, unfortunately, once again, there we have an example of not really getting the benefit that we're being promised.
I think we should shift a little bit here. One of my regrets, as I've said before, is that the commission didn't do more research and look at some of the examples of other cities. And we encourage people to look at our website where you can see a lot of that data that we don't have time to give you right now, but comparing the other towns and cities in Massachusetts in terms of voter turnout and the nature of the turnout, who participated. I regret that the Charter Commission didn't have these conversations. And I regret that the conversation in the Charter Commission didn't lead to a less acrimonious and more balanced situation. I'm so unhappy that there's such a high level of anger. And anger is a really bad way to make political decisions. We're all disappointed. I know you and I were on opposite sides of the school vote. I was very disappointed. There are a number of people in town who are upset at certain particular decisions that town meeting makes. But to blame town meeting for this vote or that vote is really irrational. Anger is such a terrible way to design government. And this vote feels to me like Amherst Brexit. A vote made in reaction and out of anger that ends up hurting everyone and can't be undone.
Yeah, I think it's I think that we are at a cross points where we can try to decide what is really valuable about what we have and what are the kinds of ways that we have of improving and building on the tremendous successes, like the success in having women, the success in having really low barriers to participation that allow all sorts of people, renters, low income, to participate. And we in town meeting are working on different ways of increasing access. So we have electronic voting just recently implemented to allow voter access to records. We have meet the candidate forums. We have a lot of ways of improving that we've already been rolling out from year to year. So I look forward to continuing to work on improving the really strong democracy that we already have.
Great. So in summary, we strongly urge you to vote no, and if you're not sure how to vote, don't vote for it because it's a big deal and it's permanent. Vote no on March 27th to defeat the charter that would make Amherst a city and end our robust participatory government as we know it.
I would really also encourage you to please read the charter if you haven't. You can get copies in print from the town clerk's office. You can also get them online, and the League of Women Voters Amherst has produced a really remarkable chart that breaks down all the pieces of that. Please be familiar with the actual charter.
Check out our webpage. Check out the other web pages, and please read Michael Greenebaum's blog on Blogspot. Thank you.
Thank you.